with that, let me ask you this. That transition?
Like it. Segue.
Yeah, so we have two of them. So one of them has to do with a fucking audio clip that I didn't pull up because I'm an asshole. But it's from Up First from earlier this week, and they're talking about how populism and nationalism is on the rise. And I'm trying to, if I can find it quickly, then I'll pull up the thing.
Sounds like a clip that it sounds very similar to another NPR clip that we looked at.
They were talking about...
That was the Oliver Anthony clip that we talked about.
Yes. This one had to do with an election in, like, fucking Germany or some shit like that. And it was the leader of this country.
I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
But yeah, I know the election.
About how nationalism and populism is on the rise.
Yeah.
Right? Do you remember this statement that they're made? Because really it's not... It's not extremely important that we hear the audio clip, but that just would have been obviously
I listen
better.
to Up First sometimes.
Yeah.
I find this is really I don't hate them, but I found them really annoying during Ukraine because still obviously there's a current that's still going on, but it would literally be like 5 minutes of every week.
Oh, yeah.
Is a Ukraine episode, and I'm like, okay, I understand this is a world topic, but there's other things we can talk about.
There's so many other things.
So I just kind of toned it, stopped watching less of it just because I felt like I was wasting 5 minutes of my drive. With
I don't blame you.
And it's minor updates too. It's Ukraine took a city.
Cool.
But they got to make sure that you don't forget about it. I found it, so now I'm just...
Found it?
Well, yes.
Nice.
Sorry.
I don't know how you just have this categorical mind where you know exactly what fucking note card to pull out when you need it. It's pretty fucking impressive.
I keep them organized in here by date. So the newest ones are always in the front. So I know that because I just did these ones because they were for this episode. So I knew that it had something to do, was going to be around these Josh Keaton cards. And I just put them in here. So I knew they would be in here. So let's hope I actually have the right thing.
If not, we'll always wish we did.
Populism and nationalism are spreading throughout Europe, and should these results hold, it'll show the world that this trend is not inevitable and that voters can put a stop to it as they seem to have here in Poland. It'll also mean that the European Union again has a close partner in Warsaw, and that the difficult work of restoring a democracy will begin again for the 40 million people here in Poland. NPR's Rob Schmitz.
Okay, so the question has to do with the populism and nationalism thing, right? Because I've been hearing a lot of different people talk about this particular idea, whether it is breaking points, and they're talking about different candidates that are going on in the 2024 election. They were talking about Bernie Sanders last time, and they were comparing him to who the fuck were they talking about this time?
That gets a lot of populists.
So maybe that's what they were talking about.
Yeah, either that or their big guy was he's a Green Party dude, crazy ass hair.
Cornel West.
Cornel West.
West.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love him.
Yes. Okay. So their deal is how populism is on the rise, right? So my question first is whether or not you guys think that populism and nationalism both are on the rise, right? Whether it is domestically or around the world, and you don't have to necessarily answer both because the global thing is a little bit more difficult to answer. And if so, then why? Right? Because, and I'll answer first, you guys have time to think, because I think there's a good argument to be made for that, when you're looking at, certainly at America, at the different candidates that we have had gain prominence here. Donald Trump was very much a populist candidate and also very much a nationalist candidate, right? And not in the purest sense of the word, that the shit was literally America first, right? So a nationalist candidate, and I think that is starting to become more prevalent on the left as well. The candidates that are going to gain prominence kind of seem to be having to embrace that. To me, that seems like a very natural reaction from the citizenry when a lot of people in America specifically have been feeling for a long time that their leadership is not acting the way that they want them to. They're not actually doing what they want. They're doing what their leadership thinks best, and leadership thinks is best. And we've talked a few times on the show about kind of two main ways that representatives look at their job, and that's whether or not they feel like they're elected because their constituents like their ideas and they're supposed to do what they think is right, or if they're supposed to be doing what their constituents want all the time. And it seems like we're seeing more of the former, whereas people seem to want more of the latter, response to what we're asking for, not what you think is the right thing. So I think that's probably where I'll end my answer to that question, and then to open up to you guys. If you think that is true, that populism and nationalism are on the rise, why you think that is, and then if you think it's an inherently bad thing? Because NPR doesn't seem to be pleased about those things
Of
gaining
course not.
prominence in the world.
Yeah.
Of course not. Josh, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll start. I think it is the hard part is like defining nationalism and patriotism, because it's how you define those words. Because
Yeah.
I think how you define them has a lot to do with how you feel about them. Because I imagine NPR would based on what I know about them, would probably be call themselves patriots. I don't know if they would call themselves nationalists.
Yeah.
And so I think using that framework, they would see nationalism as a negative, because I think the way I think they're defining nationalism as is my country is right regardless of whether it's actually right.
Yeah.
Maybe not that per se, but
Like a blind nationalism.
Yeah, like I
America's the best.
America,
no matter what.
like it or leave
yeah,
it.
America. Yeah. If you don't like it, leave. You
Yeah.
know, that kind of thing.
I remember being one of those people back in the day.
If you don't like it, I'll help you back.
But
Yeah.
I don't understand the populism, because every president, I think when I'm thinking presidents that we've really clinged to as a country are very populist presidents.
Right.
Like Roosevelt and both Roosevelts were populist presidents.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much Kennedy, because he barely won. But I would definitely say Lyndon Johnson.
Yep.
He was a populist president. Reagan, a populist president.
Certainly.
And then even Obama and Trump are both populist presidents. So the idea that like populism is bad is somehow not is an indicative that like people are wishy-washy and go to the whims of the politicians. Is
Yeah.
like some of our most esteemed leaders that we've ever had in the history of our country did get into power in that kind of legacy by appeasing to the people, which is like how democracy works, you know, versus kind of what you're talking about. Like,
Right.
is it a leader's job to, I have great ideas, vote for me, or you have great
Right.
ideas, get me in power so I can enact those ideas.
And in the case of NPR, it does read as more malicious to me, not when they're talking about or giving this air of negativity to populism. It's not because they think that people are wishy-washy. It's because they think that people don't know what is best, and we do.
Yeah.
And if you just don't worry about what you want and let us figure it out for you, and then things will be okay. Which is a really gross way to look
Yeah,
at politics.
if you
a very gross way to look at the society in general, that you guys don't know, but we know. So if you just put the right people in, then we'll figure it all out. You know?
Yeah, and that's because I would essentially agree with the way you guys are laying it out. Nationalism, populism, I would say are more or less on the rise in specific political factions that are they have loud voices now. We have instant communication on a mass scale, so we're seeing it a lot more. And the ability for the populace to like make their voices heard is way easier than it ever was. So it might seem like there's more populism, but yeah, I don't know if there really is more populism. We're probably we're probably viewing it for the first time and
yeah.
looking at the difference there. But
Because I think that Josh laid out a good case that it's been that
It's
way
been
here
that way.
for a very long time.
exactly,
you
I mean,
know?
how
That's how a democracy works.
presidents win by getting, well, ideally, I mean, the more votes you get, you become president. It's a fucking
Yes.
popularity contest.
Yeah,
My electoral college and all that stuff, but at its base level, the way it's supposed to work is the more people that vote for it, the more delegates get assigned to that candidate, and then bing, bang, boom. By the transfer of property, you're now the president because
Right.
you were the most popular or whatever. But so, like, the president is like a populist position as far as our electoral system goes. Whether or not it should be or not is another question in my mind. But to like address why NPR seems concerned about it,
Yeah.
it's because they are. Because what
Right.
because what
Yes.
what does populism push back against? Technocracy. I had to look it up to make sure I was right. But yeah, the technocracy is the society run by professionals and experts.
Right.
And they are the professionals and the experts. CNN are the professionals and the experts. Even Fox News are the professionals and the experts. The politicians are. The business leaders, the union leaders, all those people. And it's if you don't listen to them, then you're doing something wrong. And populism pushes back usually against the wrongs that those same people have done or the mistakes they've made over the time. And so they are definitely threatened. NPR is definitely threatened by a mass understanding or maybe awakening of populism within the society. And so
Right.
they don't like that because they lose control.
And
They all lose control, and which is why they push back against it. It's why they label people fucking domestic extremists and this, that, and the other thing, because those are all tools they can use to maintain their grasp on power.
And if I remember correctly, this segment was about a not populist president being elected in Poland, and how
Yeah.
like this person is showing that maybe we're turning the tide against this nationalism and populism. I think it's a very good point. They're,
Yeah, because-
they're pleased that this is happening, so they don't want those two things to be on the rise.
Because that's when they talk about that guy in his run for presidency, and the I think he was the president or the prime minister of Poland. I don't remember exactly which one it was that was in that election. He was like supposedly had been very popular because he was, as they would call him, a far right wing nationalist, guy, and then so he lost ultimately, in which case NPR is super happy because that means democracy is protected from the far right.
Yes.
And that's why they've been focusing on that, because Poland's in like it's in a very, very interesting spot right now, considering
Yes.
what's going on with Russia, Ukraine.
No,
And
literally.
So, yeah, and so they, because on a more nationalist side of, especially within the right wing of like European politics, that guy was advocating for like, we're not going to be sending any more equipment to Ukraine. We're not going to be sending any more money to Ukraine. We're fucking done with this.
We're not bringing in their
We're
grain.
not doing
We're not-
this.
right.
Yes, they took in tons and tons of refugees as soon as the war started, and so they're like, we're just done. We're tapping out because we're not interested in this situation anymore. But with the new, more, we'll just call them more centrist leaning politicians are going to take over now, I guarantee you that the floodgates are going to be right back open to money and equipment and all that for Ukraine.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that NPR is going to be focusing on there, because that's the cause du jour still. You've got to back up Ukraine still. We still got to keep doing this thing, even though they already lost the war, but that's fine. We'll talk about that later in part 3.
Before I ask the second question, I want to remind everybody to like, subscribe, share this with everybody that's watching, everybody that you know. You can find us on our own personal social media. I'm at Salt of the Street on Twitter and at alpaca_Donavan on Instagram. Colin is at Big Birdie Offie on both of those things. You can find all this at saltofthestreets.com, including the Patreon, patreon.com/saltofthestreets. All these segments, the show, everything is executively produced by Zeke, who's down here in the comments, who said that seems very elitist. It is. And I want to remind everyone to evaluate and adjust your relationship with the CCP as much as you can.
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to